Long ago, in a distant kingdom nestled between rolling hills and lush forests, there existed a land of unimaginable prosperity. The kingdom was ruled by King Aliran, a man both loved and feared. His reign was marked by wisdom, and his people thrived under his leadership. For years, the kingdom flourished, becoming a beacon of hope and success. But within the walls of his palace, something far darker was brewing. It was a quiet thing at first, creeping into the king's heart like a poison. And it was something that would ultimately tear apart not only his kingdom, but also his very soul. King Aliran, though once noble, had grown restless. Power, it seemed, was no longer enough. He sought more immortality, unchallenged dominion, a place where he could never be overthrown. But in his quest for greater power, he was approached by a mysterious figure, one who claimed to possess the secrets of eternal life and dominion over the land itself. This figure was known only as the Shadow, a being cloaked in darkness, whose words were like honey but whose intentions were pure poison. Celiran, a Daila pact sealed with blood. All the king had to do was betray those closest to him, sacrifice his most loyal knights and advisors, and pledge his soul to the Shadow. In return, Aliran would be granted power beyond imagination. He would become immortal, his kingdom would prosper forever, and no enemy would ever dare challenge him. Giga, blinded by ambition and desire, agreed to the pact without a second thought. He turned against his closest allies, imprisoned them in the dungeons of the castle, and had his most trusted knights executed under false charges. One by one, those who had once been his companions and friends fell victim to his betrayal. But the cost of such power was steep, and the king would soon discover that the Shadow had no intentions of fulfilling his promises. Sent instead of eternal life, Aliran's kingdom was cursed. The land itself began to wither, crops died, rivers ran dry, and an unnatural darkness spread across the once thriving countryside. The people, abandoned by their king, suffered in silence, while Aliran, now a tyrant, locked himself away in his castle, growing more and more consumed by the power he had sought. Years passed, and the curse deepened. The land that had once been full of life now stood as a barren wasteland. The sun itself seemed to avoid the kingdom, casting it into a perpetual twilight. The people grew desperate, but their king, now a shadow of his former self, cared little for their suffering. His pact with the Shadow had turned him into something unrecognizable. His eyes, once full of wisdom and compassion, were now cold and lifeless, consumed by the darkness he had invited into his heart. In the distant corners of the kingdom, rumors began to spread. Whispers of the king's betrayal and the curse had befallen. The land reached the ears of those still brave enough to fight against the tyranny. Among them was a young warrior named Arandor, a man whose family had once served in the king's court. He had watched, powerless, as his home had been destroyed, his people withered, and his beloved land fell under the king's cruel reign. But Arandor was not like the others. He did not believe that all was lost, nor did he believe that the king was beyond saving. Arandor had heard of an ancient relic, said to possess the power to break curses and restore balance to the land. It was a sword forged by the gods themselves, a blade imbued with the light of justice, capable of severing the ties between the king and the Shadow. Arandor believed that if he could find this sword, he could bring an end to the king's reign and lift the curse that had plagued the kingdom for so long. But the road ahead was treacherous. The kingdom was filled with beasts and horrors creatures twisted by the curse, born of the dark magic that had seeped into the earth. And worst of all, the shadow still lingered, its influence over Alaron stronger than ever. The closer Erendor came to the truth, the more dangerous the path became. Gay. And in the depths of the king's castle, Alaron was aware of Erendor's quest. He knew that the warrior sought to end the curse. But Alaron was determined not to let go of the power he had gained, no matter the cost. Erendor journeyed far, across desolate fields and through haunted forests, fighting off the twisted creatures that lurked in the shadows. As he drew closer to the castle, the air grew thick with the stench of decay, and the land itself seemed to resist his every step. Yet, with each passing day, he felt the weight of his mission growing heavier. Gadboo. He could feel the eyes of the cursed kingdom upon him, and he knew that time was running out. If he did not reach the castle soon, the last remnants of hope would be consumed by the darkness. Bugger, when Erendor finally arrived at the gates of the castle, the sight before him was like something out of a nightmare. The once grand palace was now a crumbling ruin, its towers reaching skyward like skeletal fingers. Dolls, once adorned with tapestries and art, were now cracked and covered in a thick layer of grime. As he entered the castle, the air grew cold, and the sound of his footsteps echoed in the emptiness. In the heart of the castle, Erendor found Alaron, once a king, now a hollow shell of a man. Burr. The king sat upon a throne made of bone, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. He did not move when Erendor entered, but the warrior could feel his presence in every corner of the room. The king was not alone. The shadow, too, had manifested, its form shifting and undulating like smoke. "You've come to break the curse," Alaron's voice echoed, cold and devoid of humanity. "But you cannot defeat what you cannot see. The shadow is within me, and the curse is mine to command. You cannot save this land, Erendor. You will fail, just as all those before you have failed." Erendor raised his sword, the blade gleaming in the dim light of the throne room. "I will not fail. I will free this land, no matter the cost." And with that, the battle for the kingdom's soul began. The clash between Erendor and the cursed king was like nothing the world had ever seen. The air itself seemed to crackle with dark energy, as Alaron summoned the full force of the shadow, enveloping the room in a swirling tempest of malevolent magic. Erendor fought bravely, his sword cutting through the darkness, but the king's power was overwhelming. Each strike he made was met with resistance from the cursed magic that now controlled Alaron's every move. As the battle raged on, Erendor realized that he was not just fighting for the kingdom, but for Alaron's soul. The king, once a noble ruler, had been consumed by his own ambition and betrayal. And it was this darkness that had cursed the land. If Erendor could defeat the shadow, he could restore the king's humanity and free the kingdom from its eternal torment. Sir, with a final, desperate strike, Erendor plunged his sword into the heart of the king's throat, shattering the dark magic that had bound all around to the shadow. The room erupted in a burst of light, and for the first time in years, the castle felt alive again. The curse was broken, and the land began to heal. But as Alaron fell to his knees, his eyes filled with sorrow, regret, and pain. "I am sorry," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I have condemned us all." And so, the land was freed from the curse of betrayal, but the cost was great. The kingdom would never be the same, and the legacy of the king's betrayal would live on in the hearts of those who survived. Erendor having fulfilled his mission, left the kingdom to rebuild, knowing that some wounds would never fully heal. But he also knew that in the end, the land was no longer accursed. It was free.